I wondered if you could offer some insight into how specifically Jan Smuts's work contributed to your thinking and awareness.
Yeah, yeah, Chris, I'm glad you asked about it because, yeah, let me give a little bit of a history to it too as well. I grew up with Smuts as one of my heroes because of his role in two world wars and the Boer War, his service in British cabinets through two world wars. And I saw him as a child. I was one of the schoolboys wildly waving a Union Jack as he drove past with the King and Queen on their first visit to Rhodesia after the war. So he was a wartime hero of mine, and I didn't think much more about it. When I started trying to solve, first to understand and then solve the problem of desertification that ultimately led to holistic management, I knew of Smuts's book. In fact, I had bought it. I tried to read it, and it was too much for my mind. It's dense, and I was interested in elephants and wildlife and, other things. So I really began trying to solve the problems as an ecologist only, reductionist scientist, trained ecologist. And it was only when I had got some tremendous successes in 4 or 5 countries with healing the land, and then they started to go wrong. And when they started to go wrong, and I looked at why, it wasn't because of the holistic, as it's become, grazing planning that we were doing. It was because it was my fault. I had been typically reductionist and looked at managing land. Well, you actually can't manage land because it's so tied to the culture of the people. And that's so tied to the economy that they're indivisible. Now, at that point, when I realized, okay, the mistake is mine, it's not the people who are now running into trouble, that's when I picked up Smuts's book and started to read seriously. And I'm actually rereading it again now. It's such an incredible, came into our work when we started to manage the culture, the economy, the environment together, indivisible, absolutely indivisible. Now, a lot of people misread Smuts, I think. Some, what's it, the sum is greater than the parts or something, is the way to express it. There are no connections in nature. There are no parts in nature. That's what Smuts was saying. And I finally realized it. It's absolutely individual. Parts, connections, these are mechanistic thinking.
Yes.
So anyway, that's how it came about. Yeah.
So over how many years did you study that text? Because when I read your holistic management textbook, it was as though you had this realization that the holistic worldview was different to anything prior. You went back to Smuts. And from my reading of the book, it seemed to take a number of years whilst Jan Smuts's work supported you.
Yeah, it did. There was no aha moment with Smuts's work. It took, he gave the theory. And so I have no theory. People often criticize me for my theory. I don't have one. What I took was the theory he gave us that everything in nature functions in wholes. Now, I could see it as an ecologist in communities, that nature doesn't function in populations, in species. It functions in communities. That is the whole where there's all the symbiosis. Now, I could see that as an ecologist. What I hadn't realized was that, until I read Smuts, that same functioning in wholes was in the physical world. What was a big awakening to me in Smuts's theory was how he followed the development always in wholes and patterns, from crystals and material, rock, physical matter, through to life, and then through to mind. So that was an incredible awakening for me to do that. Now, I never did anything but use his theory and try to bring it into practice with managing holistically. Now, one of the things that really fascinates me, And I don't normally talk about it at all in public because people aren't ready for that level of intellectual. Quaker friends of his and letters and so on, people have been able to recognize that he thought that his work would lead, or holism would lead ultimately to ethical human beings, that people like Jesus Christ and other religious leaders were outliers of what humans might eventually become, ethical beings. Now, what fascinates me most about our work with holistic management is that it enables that to begin happening. For example, all humans, I believe, including myself, make our decisions in our own self-interest. Now, churches, religions have been trying to overcome that with saints, anointing saints and so on. But I believe even the saints probably acted in their own self-interest. Now, I see that in myself. I've tried to do good most of my life, but when I think of why, I did it in my own self-interest, okay? Because I cannot live with myself except to behave that way. And as I think of it, when any human now develops their holistic context to guide them in the management of the complexity in their lives, if they do that, any human at that point discovers that it is never in our self-interest to damage another human or the environment. So it becomes okay for every human to begin making all decisions in their own self-interest. You don't need saints to do that. So that fascinates me, and I would give anything if I could sit today with Smuts and talk and discuss with him and say, you're right, this is going towards what you probably thought.
Well, I'm sure that from a holistic perspective, just you asking that question and observing that now, he's probably getting the message in another dimension. So your work of holistic management, as you describe and as you practice, really invites us to fully utilize this holistic awareness, holistic thinking. And it also means, if you link to what you've described in the call today, that there are no parts, there are no interconnections, and the holistic context really is a function of multiple simultaneous shaping of different life forms as they interact, from the physical to the biological to the psychological, which I think is the scope you've just covered. So one of the questions that they're interested in on Sunday then is, given the influence that Jan Smuts had on your work, how does your work contribute to shaping up life on Earth?
Okay, how does it contribute? Let me try and answer this way. If we, all scientists, all mainstream, the bulk of, let's say almost all scientists are today agreed that today almost all scientists are agreed that climate is changing rapidly and that it is entirely due to human activity. Now, if you take that agreement of the bulk of scientists, then what does human activity mean? And people aren't thinking that through. What human activity means is it's happening to us because of the actions humans are taking in day-to-day management and in policies of governments, international agencies, environmental organizations. That's the only way that humans can, we can look at what human activity means. It means the decisions humans have made in trying to improve our lives as we do through management. So really, logically, we now have the majority of scientists agreeing that humans are causing climate change and desertification, as we've known for thousands of years, and that that is 100% due to the actions humans are taking through day-to-day management and policy. That is an inescapable logic. Now, who in the world is addressing how humans decide those actions? And really, almost nobody is doing that, other than the people involved in our network now around the world who are looking seriously at that. So when you ask what will the impact of Smuts's theory and what we've done with it be, it's immeasurable, because if we don't begin to address the cause of desertification and climate change, we are bound to fail. That's a given. Now, how do we address the cause? We address the cause by looking at how we make our decisions daily in our lives, in our businesses, on our farms, all society, and through the policies of our governments, our institutions, our universities, our environmental organizations. That is, again, an inescapable logic. So, following that, if we heed Smuts's theory and develop on where we are at the moment, all right, it means we've got a fighting chance for future generations, the Greta Thunbergs of the world, to give them a fighting chance. If we don't do that, and we simply persist in looking at actions, whether to do organic agriculture or regenerative agriculture, looking at actions, but not how those actions are decided, then, frankly, civilization will not persist. We will now destroy civilization globally. I don't think there's any argument about that. We have seen the demise of civilizations in all regions of the world. We've never been able to stop it, and now the threat is global. And I get frantic trying to get people to just look at the cause, which is how we make decisions.
Mm. So there's an elegant simplicity when one adopts an holistic stance. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, and just logic.